Was that?
Behind on Montvale Ave, you know where the McDonald's is? Up on the hill to the side. That's
Where the registry used to be.
yeah, but behind it, further down the road and up the hill, they tore down all of the, I think it was General Mills that took over that factory. They've torn it all down. They're putting all kinds of new stuff up there. But I just read a thing, they were going to have office park buildings and they got permission to put in life science buildings instead. But they're also putting in senior housing and condos and all sorts of good things. And Mass General tried to get in there, but they withdrew because they heard they were going to be turned down by the public health people.
I was over there walking yesterday on the Stoneham bike path.
Yeah.
And it's really awesome. It looks like another world. It looks almost like, I don't know, like they're building another whole city or town. It's a huge lot.
It is. It's mammoth.
Yeah.
Okay, should we begin? All right. So I think what we did last time is we call to order first. Is that correct, Mark? Or does it make that much of a difference?
Either way.
Either way?
Go for it.
Okay. So I'll call the recall meeting to order and we'll begin with the roll call. So Ron Assini.
Here.
Okay, Nora Bucco.
Here.
John Parsons.
Here.
John Sasso.
Present.
Michael Colton.
Here.
And John O'Neill. So we're all, Mark Doxer.
Thank you. I'm here too.
Okay. So the recalc it's been called to order. So Marilyn, do you want to?
Sure. Debbie Small? Nope. Joan Coco? Nope. Karen Fotino?
Here.
Thanks. Karen Panett?
Here.
Marilyn Shapley here. Karen Janowski?
Here.
John Parsons?
Here.
Sally Hoyt? No. Sandy Schaefer? No. Nancy Twadros?
Here.
Nancy Zimlack?
Here.
Jackie Behenna? No. Rosemary Di sorry, I always get tongue-tied on your name, Rosemary. Di
I'm here.
Benedetto.
I'm here.
Thanks. Beverly Cuneo? Jolene Eck? And Jean Pratt, is it pronounced Prado?
Prado. Here.
Welcome.
Thank
We have
you.
a new member. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 full members here, so we are called to order as well.
Is Jean a full member or an associate?
An associate.
Associate.
Jean is an associate, yes. But Nancy Twadros and Karen Janowski are now both full. So we have a full board for the first time in a long, long time. And we've filled in all the slots once again. There was a meeting a couple of weeks ago, I guess the subcommittee that picks the people who are on the board made these decisions and let us know.
So they make a recommendation and the select board votes on it, just to fully accurate. And
Okay,
you did
thank
so.
you.
Okay, Jean, do you want to introduce people from UMass?
Sure, thank you. With us tonight and on the agenda is an update from the team from the UMass Technology Institute, Caitlin Coyle and Sarah Somerville. I will pass it off to Caitlin.
All right, thanks, Jean. Good to see all of you. Before we get into it, just wanted to recap that we are presenting, sort of previewing the presentation that we plan to make next week at the Board of Selectmen recalc meeting. And so we'll be sharing that with you all this evening and hoping to get your feedback and reactions to ensure that, if there's anything we can do to make things more clear or more useful to you in preparation for next week, please let us know that. So it's a bit of a preview this evening, and also just to note that we are in sort of the final stages of editing the lengthy report itself, and it will be ready for that December 6th meeting. So that's where we are. I'm gonna kick us off, and Sierra's gonna help me out a little bit. One question, Jean, remind me how much time we have next week for this presentation.
Usually I think we budget like a little bit of time in case there's discussion. So I'd have to double check exactly what that looks like, but
Okay.
usually the board is looking for something like, 10-15 minute presentation, and then that way the agenda can accommodate some discussion.
Okay, we might be a little over that in terms of what we prepared for this evening, so that's something we can think about in preparation for next week as well. Okay. All right. All right, everybody can see that? All right. Okay. So we are here to share the key findings and recommendations for the community engagement and planning process related to the Reading Center for Active Living. Oh, I'm in notes. What does that mean? Sorry.
As you're in notes, I just did a quick check. We budgeted 45 minutes in total. So that would be both for the presentation and the discussion with the board.
Okay.
So I would say, targeting under 30 minutes for the presentation certainly makes sense to allow for time for discussion.
Yep.
Thanks.
Got it. Thank you. All right. Smells.
Galen, do you have two monitors?
I do have two monitors.
Yeah, up at the top, you switch monitors.
Yep. All right. I
It says
see.
switch displays.
Yep.
There you go.
Oh.
Nope.
Mm.
Maybe first share your screen and then start the PowerPoint and then swap displays.
That's it. It's working now.
No, I got my. I don't know why I've never had this problem.
So up at the top, it says,
see the
see, it
display
says
button.
display. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. How's that?
There you go. There
Perfect.
you go.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we're here to tell you about the key findings and the recommendations based on the work that we've done. We want to acknowledge all of you for your commitment in terms of developing the survey and making this process go off, specifically Jean and Jenna and Kevin, who've been our sort of liaisons to you all throughout the process, and obviously all of the residents who took the time to participate in a forum, a focus group, or complete a survey in any of the ways that were possible. And as a reminder, the project was commissioned by the town to guide a public engagement and planning process for how the community should move forward with the future needs for programming space, either for a new senior center or community center. That's and that this final report is meant to inform both of the boards who are present here, the Recalc committee, as well as the COA, to inform their planning and decision-making moving forward, as well as to raise the awareness of the needs of Reading residents among both the community at large and other municipal departments and organizations that work on behalf of the community. Really an opportunity to sort of hear what's on the minds of Reading residents, and that information potentially is useful to people beyond those involved directly in this process. This is old news to many of you, but just as a reminder in terms of where you've been, in terms of the Pleasant Street Center opening, and you know, our work back in 2017, which really demonstrated that the Pleasant Street Center space was not adequately meeting the needs of the older population in Reading. Then the appointment of the Recalc Committee to develop some plans for the future, and then our re-engagement in 2022 to really talk with the community about what are their needs and preferences as they relate to.
The woman there is the woman from UMass Boston Gerontology Institute.
Tom, you
Hi,
know-
Tom. Hi, Tom. It's good to see you. You're not on mute.
Sorry,
Okay.
we're late.
No problem. All right. So, oops. In terms of the project overview, what we did, we conducted 3 public forums in the spring of 2022. We conducted 4 focus groups over the summer with various stakeholder groups and residents of a variety of ages. And then we conducted a community survey of residents age 18 and over in the month of September, where we received 1,470 survey responses. I'm going to turn it over to Sierra, who's going to talk a little bit about the findings. Sierra, I can
Okay.
advance slides for you.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, so I'll share the key findings largely focused from the survey results, but you know, I'll also note that pretty much everything we heard in the survey was really echoed and confirmed with what we heard during the forums and the focus groups. Before we get to some survey results, just sort of to set us up for looking at what the Reading population looks like. Currently, about 25,000 residents, about a quarter of that is under the age of 18, and about a similar share of the population is age 60 and older. So at both ends of the life spectrum, we have about half of the population of Reading. Next slide. And so based on projections, population projections computed by the UMass Donahue Institute, we took a look at what the population, how it's expected to change in the next 10 years. And so the overall population of Reading is expected to increase modestly at about 9%. But then when we look at the age breakdown, we see the most growth among older adults, age 60 to 79 and 80 and older, as well as working age adults, so those age 20 to 49. And so I think this really supports that, you know, the population of Reading is older and is going to continue to get older, as well as there still being a need to meet the needs and interests of some of the younger residents. Next slide. And so from the survey results, we really heard that people are happy living in Reading. More than half reported it being very or somewhat important to continue living in Reading, and the overwhelming majority of survey respondents reported that they plan to stay in Reading for the next 5 years or more. So there's really a commitment to staying in the community. We certainly heard at forums and focus groups that people value a lot of the assets and, you know, the charm and value a lot of different things about living in Reading. And so these people really would like to stay. Next slide. But we also heard a lot about challenges. One of the open-ended questions on the survey was, what are your greatest challenges or concerns as you get older? And we heard a lot about being concerned about being able to afford to continue to live in Reading, with the cost of living and taxes and other bills. Concerned about housing, not just the availability and affordability of housing, but being able to maintain their property and their house as they get older. Transportation, not just among older adults who may not be able to drive, but just getting around town can be challenging across ages. And as well, we heard people being concerned about remaining healthy and socially engaged and remaining part of the community. So there's a very wide net of needs and concerns among the survey respondents. And I think things that are already happening in the town can support those concerns, and this is a really opportunity to consider these key issues as this project moves forward. So sort of the meat of our survey questions, asking folks about preferences for type of center and where it might be located. So about half of all survey respondents would prefer an all ages community center, and about a third reported preferring a senior center. A small share, about 10%, said they had no preference, and about a similar size share of respondents also selected other. Among those who selected other, their write-ins, those included preferences for like they were responding more about amenities of the center, and also a few responded, you know, that they don't think we need something new, like a new building, and satisfaction with what exists. But again, that was sort of a small share of respondents. And then when it came to location, almost half reported having no preference, and about a third prefer the downtown area. And among the 15% who reported other, those write-ins focused less around specific locations, but about access to, wanting to make sure that they can actually get to the center wherever it's located, and being able to park and being able to walk. So we also broke this up by age group. So sort of unsurprisingly, the preference for a senior center exclusively increases with age, which was not too surprising. But I think it's important to note that even among the older adults, there's still a sizable share who would support an all ages community center. That includes designated space and programming for older adults. We then followed that with an open-ended question to just tell us more about your preference for the scenarios you selected. And 3 key themes that came out of the write-ins we got. I think about 800 people responded and wrote in their thoughts. One key theme is that the idea of a community center is nice, that it can support inclusion and cohesion and just forming and maintaining connections with residents across the city and across age groups and backgrounds, really an opportunity to engage with others. Another sort of set of responses we heard were about identifying important attributes, sort of no matter what type of center it is, important to folks were having parking and having a variety of programming offerings, having space that can be flexible and adaptable, and again, having some separate space and programming by age groups. And then a third theme that came out of this write-in was some resistance to the idea of a new building or development. Folks were really concerned about potential cost to the town, and then how that will affect their individual costs. And a number of residents feeling or reporting that they think that there are a number of competing priorities at the town for expenses, and think that maybe the financials should be spent differently. And along with that, thinking about, you know, the town has existing resources. Why do we need a new building? We can reuse what we have. So that was a common theme from people writing in about their preference for scenarios. Next slide. So related to the financials, one of the survey questions we asked was, you know, if there were an increase to your tax bill, what is the maximum amount you might support for a new building? And so looking at this across age groups, it was pretty consistent by age that the majority prefer, about a third of respondents across age groups would support it at no cost increase to their household taxes, and then an additional 15 to 20% at less than $100 per year. So about half or a little more would prefer little to no cost increase to their tax bill, and they would support a new building. We then asked a set of questions for folks to prioritize the types of spaces they wanted or would prioritize in a new center, indoor spaces, outdoor spaces, and then accessibility features. So here we present the top 5 preferred indoor spaces by age groups. So for all ages, really about multi-purpose space, being able to engage in small groups, having indoor exercise space, and having the ability to eat and share a meal together were important across age groups. One sort of standout is that for among those 80 and older, having lobby or lounge space, some informal socializing space was a top priority. And that was sort of only a top 5 priority for age 80 and older. Outdoor spaces was a little more consistently ranked by age group. People want to be able to relax outside with some benches, some outdoor seating, some outdoor dining space, as well as having, being able to engage in some light activity, grass area for lawn games, and a walking or running track. Sort of the only standout here is that the splash pad was among the top 5 priorities among those aged 80 to 49, likely reflecting having children and keeping them engaged. But for the most part, outdoor space was consistently ranked across age groups. And then in terms of accessibility features, the top 2 for all age groups was having no to little cost to participate, as well as ample parking. So being able to participate, getting there and being able to engage at little or no cost was really important across age groups. We also see that the possibility of evening and weekend activities, having enough space for multiple programs, and having door-to-door transportation were priorities for most respondents. Okay. And so moving on, thinking about some of the survey key findings, reflecting on what we heard from the forums and focus groups as well. The first area of recommendation and to think about is that there is support for having or developing additional space for the community, but more information is needed for residents. So we suggest, we've heard that Recalc has done a lot to push out on the website and newsletters and their email lists to put out information about what the committee is doing, and the COA has the newsletter, just really continuing to push out information about the initiative and the need, and doing so by a variety of methods. One question that we asked in the survey, not presented here, but in the final report, is how do you prefer to get information? And respondents really identified a variety: word of mouth, print, and web-based through social media and email. So really having a network of information methods will be important to bring people necessary information and get them on board. And I think there was still a little bit confusion for some folks who participated in our data collection about maybe why this was happening, not realizing necessarily that the Pleasant Street Center has met and exceeded its capacity. And so I think making residents more aware of that, the Pleasant Street Center has, met its limits. People value it for sure, but it can only do so much. So helping people be aware that that is really the crux of where this has come from, and that more space is needed. Next slide. And so similarly, residents also want to know sort of how a Center for Active Living would fit into the existing network of resources. We've heard qualitatively, quantitatively, that there are a number of existing places in town, the library, the Y, as 2 examples. And so knowing that there are organizations and places for people to go, the schools as well, residents really want to know what this might add to that without duplicating or taking away from what is already available. So one recommendation is to work on inventorying existing programs, services, and locations that folks can go to meet needs and interests, and to document existing relationships with organizations, as well as continuing and developing partnerships with some of those places like the library, parks and recreation, et cetera, to improve collaboration and coordination for programs and services. And then, back to the previous recommendation, and to make sure that information is shared clearly and effectively with the community that these things are available. Next slide. Okay. And so we heard that older residents are certainly open to the idea of an all ages community center, but still value having their own space and experience and programs with their peers. So some recommendations, wherever Recalc takes this, is to maintain some separate space, programs and services for older residents. Certainly want to maintain the core programs and services that are already provided through Elder and Human Services, such as food and nutrition services. Another part of that is having designated lounge and social space. So older adults want to have somewhere, or continue to have somewhere, that they can go and socialize with their peers. And the Pleasant Street Center may not be able to do that right now, but it is certainly a value to older residents. And then similarly, we heard again that although older residents want having their own space and they're, having some ownership over their own area and programs, that there is an interest in engaging with younger residents. And so consider developing some intergenerational programming in partnership with the schools or library. And so that there is a way to bridge the generations and bring them together without necessarily making everything all ages. And so back to the space preferences, residents want to be able to participate in a variety of different activities. And so the space will need to be able to accommodate things such as small group or independent activities, exercise classes, outdoor areas for relaxation or light activity, having some regular opportunity to share a meal with others, whether that be through a congregate meal program or having some cafe space. And again, having the physical space to foster informal gathering and socialization. So it's sort of a wide set of needs and interests in what people want to do. And so next slide, Caitlin, that has implications for the types of space and capacity. So one recommendation, and we heard it recommended by residents too, is to have large rooms that can accommodate many participants, especially for exercise classes and concerts and lectures and things that can be divided into multiple smaller spaces for some smaller group activities. Similarly, having some classroom or smaller program rooms that can also be equipped with technology to receive participants who may be participating virtually. That I think was very successful when we conducted the forums, having a remote option for people to participate. And I think continuing to do so in terms of programs and services will be important. Yes. And then sort of an overall idea is that the environment, not just the physical space, but the whole environment needs to be accessible and inclusive across age, background, and abilities. So in thinking about hours of operation, we'll want to think about, how can we accommodate different people's responsibilities and commitments, whether they're still working, if we're including school-aged children, just thinking about the scheduling in terms of when people could and would attend the center. Transportation emerged as an important feature for a lot of folks across ages when thinking about if they would attend or participate at a center. And so to think that through, consider maybe multi-approaches, having adequate parking spots and or maybe having some satellite parking with a shuttle transportation that can bring people right to the door. If possible, have it accessible via the existing MBTA services. And another option that emerged from the survey as well is to think about having door-to-door transportation for residents who may not drive, who may need it, who can just get to the center with services provided through Elder and Human Services. And then lastly, more about the physical space is to really think about the infrastructure from an inclusive design perspective. Some resources are available through the Massachusetts Age and Dementia Friendly Integration Toolkit, and that's really thinking about signage and wayfinding for people with vision, maybe vision impairment or cognitive impairment, making sure the floors are smooth without too many lips for mobility, having, necessary resources on one floor, if not on one floor, having the elevator, and just making sure people can access the physical space will be important.
Right.
And I'll
Sierra,
turn it back to Caitlin.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sierra. I'll stop sharing here. And I just wanted to make one last note before we open it up for questions and discussion. And this is something that didn't make it into the slides, but I may add it in for next week, which is that we did ask people how likely it would be that they would participate at such a future center. So we, how likely would you be to use the facility? And we heard that 68% of all survey respondents said that they would be very or somewhat likely to participate at this future center. And when we break that down, well, we can break that down by age, but there's the 68% of survey respondents said that they would be very likely or likely to participate at a future community or senior center. So I think that's also an important figure and important point to keep in mind. So with that, I'll open it up for questions or comments from the group. Oh, John Sasso.
Thanks, Caitlin. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Just a quick question. I know you said it, I think either you or said earlier that you didn't see any major discrepancies between what you heard in the forums and the focus groups versus the data. I just want to, query that a little bit more, because I mean, I don't, from what I can recall as well, don't see anything that appeared to be kind of out of sorts, but you guys have looked at the details. Was there anything at all that kind of stuck out as either odd or out of the place or different than what you were expecting in any of those areas?
I can speak for myself, and Sierra, if you have anything to add, you can. I mean, I think for me, the difference in what we heard from the qualitative aspects of the work versus the survey was that I felt like we heard a lot more questions and from the forums and the focus groups in terms of people wanting, they had questions about what was going on, what the process is, sort of how much is it going to cost, where is it going to be, sort of a lot of wanting more information. And it may be that was a function of the fact that a lot of that stuff happened sort of at the front end of this project. I think, and it's also just a function of the fact that, we did hear some of that through the survey, but there was just frankly less opportunity for people to make those concerns known. And so for me, that was the major, I mean, there was a lot of overlap related to just sort of the, general support for a new space of some kind, and also, anyway, the accessibility pieces. But for me, that was the main sort of difference that I observed. Sierra, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think that sums it up pretty well.
And just one other quick question, without getting into a statistical question, but so the forecast for growth in terms of population, you said that was based on some work that was done through UMass Boston?
It's actually done through Amherst, the Donahue Institute.
Okay.
And those are 2030 projections, and that are based on 2010 decennial census numbers. We don't yet have the age breakdown for the 2020 decennial census. Those are expected to come out in the spring of 2023. So I would, take it for what it is.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's fine. That's fair. All right. Thank you.
Caitlin,
Yes.
John O'Neill, on the point that was raised about people feeling that we had existing places and resources. Now, in the forums, I only heard that come up twice in all the forums. So how many people really echoed that? Because
Yeah, so that was so we did hear about that a little bit in the forums, and then I think where it came up through the survey was that open-ended question about, you know, tell us more about what your preferences are or why your preference is what it is. And that's where we heard it. And Sierra maybe can talk a little bit more about the numbers. I know we had more than, it was like 830 or something people who made comments. And I don't know what the tally was on that particular piece. Oh, you're on mute, Sierra.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember from the forums too that it wasn't necessarily about space resources, but knowing that, you know, I want to take this exercise class. Well, you can do that at the Y. Or so not just about having existing spaces, but knowing that there are things happening at places that already exist. So programs already offered through the library or the Y or the schools. So that's one piece of it, not just, well, there are existing places, it's about existing offerings. And then in terms of the write-ins for that question, of the 800, I don't know the numbers offhand, but it was a pretty sizable set of responses that identified similarly having, you know, existing programs, maybe not necessarily existing spaces.
Yeah, and I think to the space piece, my when people did make reference to things like, well, there's already buildings in town and things like that. I think that, I have an echo. I think the piece about resistance to new development.
Tom, can you go on mute?
Yeah, I came back. Sorry about that. I had to leave. Something came up and I had to change venues.
Oh. Could you mute yourself by chance?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Why won't let me mute?
There we go. So I think to the space piece, I think people were responding to a general resistance to new development, and also this sort of common assumption that new means expensive. And so sort of speaking to this idea of trying to do what we can with what we have versus, so again, I'm not saying that those things are true, but I think in the comments that we received, that's what people were responding to when they said, you know, they wanted to sort of think about what existing buildings and things like that are in place.
Mark has his hand up.
Hi, folks. Thanks, John. Couple of comments. So first of all, great. I think that you did a really nice job kind of digging behind some of the kind of broad numbers that were in there and identifying what some of the individual comments were. And that's great. That's really what we were hoping you'd be able to do. A couple of maybe thoughts or suggestions or questions. One, on that population question for a moment, I think I saw some data from MAPC, and I'm sure they didn't generate it, but I think it did look really at 2030 by age breakdown. And I think it had 2020 also. So if you're missing 2020, I thought that they must have done something with the census data from the town for 2020. I'm pretty sure they did. So maybe that's something we could update. I also would suggest that on that chart, rather than just showing kind of the percent growth in those communities or changes, is indicate what that makes the number at the end of the period. So for example, I think that the population age 60 plus currently is 26, almost 27%. I think the forecast takes it to 29 or even 30% is my recollection, but I think that would be helpful to see. And I think you can do that in the same chart. I don't think it merits another slide. Second, a couple of things that you highlighted, the door-to-door transportation, particularly in the 60 plus, actually particularly in the 70 plus, but also in the age 60 plus group, was interesting. And that's something we started to hear about. And I think that, you know, the notion of getting there isn't just parking, it's transportation. And I think that's you made that point, Sierra, which was great. I think that's really important to hear. The other thing that really stood out to me was the need for more education, that a lot of people aren't familiar with the Pleasant Street Center, the fact that it's not meeting our needs, the fact that it hasn't been meeting our needs for quite a while. I think that that's like a well-kept secret at the moment. And it's not a beat up session by any means, please don't misinterpret. It's just stating that we don't have the facilities to do a lot of the things that people are looking for. And you saw that come out in a lot of the comments. And I think that, to me, that was one of the big highlights. I love the fact that you brought up some specific suggestions in terms of open houses, in terms of, sorry, I'm not able to read my own writing. Need for people who are using it or not using it to speak out more about that and the why. I love the fact that you got 68% said that they're either very likely or somewhat likely to participate in a new center. That is kind of a highlight, I think, in terms of what's going on here also. And the last point is, I know we talk a lot about, you know, people would prefer to pay nothing for a new center. That sounds great. I like that too. The reality is that's really, really unlikely to happen. And to me, what I took out of that is I looked at kind of what's the total of people that said they'd spend at least another $100. And I think if you add that up, it's in the mid 40 kind of range or percent, something, you know, along those lines. I think that's worthy of highlighting also, just to kind of take a look at it. And that's it. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Mark. That's helpful. Nora.
Hi, thank you for all this work. The only thing that struck me, and I know it's not something for your results, but that 48% prefer community center. Now that sort of changes the whole flow, you know, the whole outlook. You know, we're talking about Walgreens and plans and programs and space. I mean, I'm not quite sure where we go with that if 48% want a community center.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know either. But I think, you know, a couple of thoughts on that general issue is, while there was 48% who support a community center, there was also a significant number of folks, especially in the older age bracket, that, you know, want senior center activities and programs and things like that. And, you know, one question is sort of, you know, the timeline of all of these things and whether, you know, what your sort of ultimate goal is versus what the immediate goals are, responding to immediate needs and things like that. But Rosemary, you're on mute, Rosemary. There you go.
Regarding information, getting it out to the public, like Mark suggested, one of the important things for the public to know is that building, the Pleasant Street Center building right now, is empty after 3 or 4 o'clock. And it would be the same thing when we have a community center. So other groups can use it, other ages can use it.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point, Rosemary, that having an all-age community center doesn't mean everyone's going to always be there all at the same time. And so thinking about, you know, yeah, I think that's a good point.
And also, on the whole, the residents of Reading do not realize that that building is too small. It's too small. We're constantly moving furniture around, we're moving people around. We're trying to figure out who can fit in the big room, who can fit in the small room. There's no storage space there. A couple of the instructors want to start a few other classes, one of them being possibly drumming. If you're not familiar with drumming, you need to have large balls. We have no place to put racks and balls so that we can have that type of a class. So it's too small.
Yeah. Yes, definitely a lot of support for the multi-purpose space, both large and small. And I think being able to accommodate large numbers of people is something that we did hear certainly about.
But my basic point is is the residents of Reading should know, in addition to it being small, the Pleasant Street Center isn't used to its full capacity a full day because it's empty after 3 or 4 o'clock. So with a community center, we would get more use out of a building.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John Sasso? And then
Yeah, just a couple other quick things. Just as a reminder that it isn't just building, it's also staff. So you can't, even if you want to have something in the evening, you need to have the staff to support it. And certainly it's something we certainly understand. The other point, in your presentation, just along these lines, I know the numbers said 48% wanted, or viewed a community center as an option, but then in some of the other presentation slides, it sounded like what they really wanted was just to know that there were other activities and programmatic things that they could access. Am I reading that correctly?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm going to see if I understand your question. So the idea is that 48% want an all ages community center. And what we also heard in other ways is that there's a lot of value placed on having sort of age specific programming and time and space that where peers can gather with peers. This idea that yes, it's an all age community center, but there is sort of designated programming and space for various age groups at various times.
Yes. Well, I'm reading into this, so please bear with me. And I'm just trying to see if this matches what one might be able to conclude. That they said, I want an all ages community center, but really what I want is I want additional programs and activities that we can access as a community. But I'm going to add this is my term, but it doesn't need to be in a single community center. It could be in all these different places that we have, which is something that I heard through some of the forums as well. And I guess I was just saying the reflection of we want an all ages community center, I guess I'm trying to say, well, maybe that doesn't necessarily mean we need an all ages community center, but really what we want is we want an all ages access to programs, and whether that's in one building or multiple buildings really is what they were trying to say. I'm reading a lot into this, so
right. Okay.
I'm just trying to understand whether or not that's something you would think about in terms of the data.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I certainly think, I'm reminded one of the focus group participants really eloquently put it about, sort of a need for a third space in Reading. Like people have places to go for work and they go to do things with family and at home and all that. But this idea that there is a need for sort of places for people to gather in Reading. And so I definitely think that came through. And I also would agree that people want to do things and they have lots of ideas about what it is that they want to do. Now, whether those two things need to be happening at the same physical location or whether, I don't know. Yeah, but okay. I guess both of those things are true.
Okay. No, I'm just, I'm talking this out and sometimes it helps me think about whether or not this is real or not. Sure. Just one other comment, and this is for the group as a whole. We've done a lot of work over the last few months on communication. And so, but it sounds like even with that, we're falling short. So I think that's an action that we kind of have to take back and figure out, okay, what else can we do? How else can we engage the community? Not just on this process, but on, to your point or to their point, what other things are available and how we can engage people. So I certainly take that message. I think we as a group have to do that as well. So I just to say thank you again. This was a great view. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and just to add just onto that point before I get to Marilyn is the idea about the communication and sort of the awareness and things like that. I think one of the things that we know about is just
can I just I'm sorry, I need to direct if you're not, I apologize, I'm not trying to be hard, but if you're not speaking, can you make sure you're muted because we're getting a lot of feedback on the line?
John,
Thank you.
I think it's John Parsons. John, can you go on mute?
Yeah, I unmuted because I had my hand up for a while. and
Yeah, sorry about that.
Thanks.
I was just gonna say, one of the things we did here, in addition to, we heard through the survey, yes, we have the YMCA, yes, we have the library, yes, we have these other spaces, but we also heard through the forums and the focus groups that a lot of those places are, they cost money, they're at capacity, there isn't, yes, we have them, but there isn't really an ability for those things to absorb new users. And so I think the piece about the inventory, or sort of, I think it would be, one thing I thought was like, it would be helpful perhaps to just sort of lay that out there for folks. Yes, we recognize that we have all of these other, the rec department and these other assets, but sort of laying out what those limits are, and helping people sort of see the value add with a new center like this might be just a useful communication tactic. Okay, Marilyn, and then John Parsons.
There you go. First, I just want to say thank you. It's a really clear presentation. Most of it jives with what I would have expected to see, and it's reaffirming to see the numbers that you've shared with us so far. I did want to comment on the hours of availability of the building, and John already has mentioned this as well. It's staffing is an issue that plays into that, but it's also policy. We do not have an inclusive policy in Reading, and I'm hoping it will get better. There's still very much the mindset that the elderly shut her down for the night at 4 PM, and there are ones who do, but not everyone. And I think that you found that there were quite a few people over age 60 who are still working, and we're just excluded. I mean, it's that simple. So it's a policy decision, and it's a budget decision that goes with a very non-inclusive policy decision. So I'm hoping that's one of the things we can alleviate with whatever direction we go in. And a community center might help with that, as opposed to calling it a senior center, but it needs to be addressed. So
yeah, thank you, Marilyn. John Parsons.
Just a couple of quick comments and then a question. The comments is kind of what Marilyn and John both said. Part of the reason the center is vacant at 3 PM, there's not enough staff to run enough programs. We had more staff, we would have things going on. Secondly, I hear it said many times that places to gather in Reading, and they mentioned the Y. Between all the programs the Y has and all the swim teams they have and everything else, there's really not that much opportunity at the Y. And my question is, back in 2017 and probably now, you've said that the building is inadequate, but did you address at all some of the real problems with the building? Like, you can't control the heat, you can't control the air conditioning. But what I think is the scariest, if you're sitting up in that room on the top to the right for 3 hours, when the heat tries to kick in, there are 4 or 5 times that you smell gas. And they get the fire department over there. By the fire department gets there, they can't, their meters don't pick up anything on it because it goes away. And I guess there's been a few people who have looked at it, who have said, well, it's not dangerous, you just smell some gas. But did you address any situations like that at all when you were saying that the building was inadequate?
Yeah, the 2017 report outlines some of those specific, issues with the building and the bathroom not on the first floor, and sort of all of those kinds of issues. And so yes, so we did. And I think for me, in sort of preparing for this presentation, I think, and maybe Mark already sort of mentioned it, I think it's important to acknowledge that, but I also don't want to I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of why the Pleasant Street Center, isn't working for us anymore, right? Sort of, we're talking, because what we're trying to get people to think about is sort of what folks want moving forward. So I hear that kind of, this is an opportunity for us to emphasize to folks who may not already know that there are limits to the Pleasant Street Center, and we can emphasize that point in our report and in the remarks. Thanks, John. And Tom.
Thank you. By the way, I thought the slides were excellent, and if possible, I'd like to have a copy of them if you could make those available. I spoke to Mark about my interest in exploring what might be done relative to transportation, and I think you have to include parking when you talk about transportation. And there's a lot of activity going on in New England and across the country. And I've contacted and reached out to a number of organizations and individuals. And there are some very interesting and powerful tools that are not very expensive. There's an organization called TASK in the lower portion of New Hampshire that is running a volunteer driver program. And I've gotten the resources for that. And then there are some village organizations, if you're familiar with the community organizations. Several of them are running volunteer driver programs. There are a number of issues associated. I was able to meet with Fidel and had about an hour's discussion with him on this and a variety of other topics. And he was encouraging me to just go ahead. My plan is to pull together information over the next 4 to 6 weeks, at least by the first of the year, and provide a simple few-page report with resources listed on that. But it seems to me that for the Walgreens area downtown, which is a parking problem, if you were to envision satellite parking areas around the town with a fairly efficient and effective volunteer driver program, you could have ferrying services back and forth. On the other hand, if you have a senior center that's located on the outskirts, people will not be able to drive. So then that's still that same volunteer driver program could be of use. So there's a lot of information, a lot going on. I'm in contact with people and I will provide that. I just wanted to make that known.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I think that's really important. We heard loud and clear that transportation issue is really important. Karen.
Thank you for the information that you've shared. I do have a question. It does seem like it's a smaller percentage of community residents that did participate. What is it, about 7%? And I'm not sure what it seems to me that is a lower percentage than what you really do hope for in a survey like this. I'm wondering, when you work with other communities, how does that compare to the involvement of residents in other communities in completing a survey like this?
Yeah, well, I'll say that when it comes, so this survey, as a reminder, was predominantly an online survey. So we did make it available. Paper copies were available at a number of locations throughout the community, and we did receive a couple hundred paper surveys. Sierra can correct me if I'm forgetting the number. And then we also received some phone calls at our center where we helped people do them over the phone. So for a predominantly online survey, 7% is actually not that bad. In most of our other work where we're working with senior centers, we do print and mail surveys to people's homes, and we observe a much higher response rate. But I appreciate your comment and question, because I think it's important for all of us to remember that, yes, we are the data that we're presenting is reflective of, those 1,500 folks who participated in the survey, as well as the, number of, and we had at least 100 people at one of, across the various forums and focus groups and things like that. But yes, it is a snapshot, a small segment.
So you think that maybe if we had mailed things out, we would have mailed the survey out, we would have had a greater community response?
Well, we mailed a postcard to people and notified them of the ways that they could complete the survey. And so we did do a mailing. And I guess I would say that in this case, our goal was to survey folks 18 and over. And so when it comes to mailing, we typically find that's most cost effective in sort of the older, the 60, 70, 80 plus sort of age brackets. And so maybe that would have helped if we had provided the survey by mail directly to their doorstep. But again, we did have it printed and available at a number of locations, and we did mail that postcard to them, notifying them of the various ways that they could complete the survey. Right, any? John Parsons?
For whatever it's worth, my ushering partner at church works for a company that does a lot of surveys. And I was bemoaning the fact to him that we got such a small turnout. And he said to me, if we get 8% back most of the time, it's really great. So I don't think the percentage we got back is that far off, at least from a person who I know who's in this business or in that business.
Yep, thanks. Marilyn?
Will your final report have just the raw, not cross-tabulated or anything, but just the raw percentage answers to all the questions on the survey?
Yeah.
Great.
In an appendix, yep. Rosemary?
Regarding information that the residents of Reading should know about is the cramped spaces that our employees are working in. We have employees sitting in hallways outside the ladies' bathroom, five feet from the ladies' bathroom downstairs. We have an employee in the upstairs hallway next to the elevator. We have our 2 medical professionals in an area the size of a bathroom. And the poor things, they've all covered up with blankets and hats because they have cold air coming right down on their head. In addition to what John mentioned about the gas smell coming on, they have very strong gas odor there and very strong gas odor in the 2 little function rooms upstairs. The public needs to know that. We need to go room by room, step by step, and list how small and the problems that are going on in the center. And in addition to that, we don't have a full-time custodian there. The people who take care of the needs are the present staff there and the senior citizens. The senior citizens are moving chairs, helping with tables, emptying trash. So we don't even have a custodian there. My feeling is that we are in the bottom part of the list. Nobody takes care of the senior citizens yet, starting with monies that are spent on them. I'm trying to find out about the budget, and I know that we had funds $900,000 for elder services. I believe about 300,000 of that is already spent. I'd like to know the allocation of those funds, what is going to be spent on the seniors who are alive today, who need transportation, who need gatherings. They want to have meals together. So I'd like to see a breakdown on that. And I think that should be made public. That should be put in the Chronicle, how those federal funds are being spent, how they are assigned. I know that they have to be spent in a certain way. And I believe there's a time setting for when they have to be spent. People deserve to know that. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosemary. All right, well, we'll make some tweaks to our presentation and get that over to Jean and Jenna tomorrow for sending out for the packet. And as I mentioned, sort of put the final touches on the report, and we will be ready to go for next week's presentation. Marilyn?
Is the next meeting also a joint council on aging meeting, or is it just recalc and select board? I certainly would like the council on aging to have the packet.
Yes, I was planning on posting recalc and COA at the meeting on Tuesday as well, if that's
Great.
okay with everyone.
Thank you, Jenna.
Of course.
Yeah.
Rosemary?
I just thought of something else I want to add to my comments about the condition of our Pleasant Street Community Center. We also have the van driver sitting in the hallway downstairs, 5 feet from the ladies' bathroom. And we have our wonderful Shine representatives sitting in a small room next to a room that used to be used for people to play pool. And our Shine representative had to deal with and call for help when some men got into a fight there in the pool area. So Shine people who help us also have a very small non-private area that they are discussing private information for the people who ask for their help. It is not a private area. The walls don't go up to the ceiling, and we have personnel sitting right outside the door. And the computers there have been donated. We have 4 computers. When I had my appointment with the Shine personnel, I said to her, where would you like me to sit? The answer was, it depends on which computer is working. So again, we're like shuffled off. We're the bottom of the list, and we shouldn't be. And I don't want us to be. So please pay attention to the problems at our present center. We do need a larger center. We need something with transportation. We need gatherings with food for the elderly. A lot of them don't want to have classes. They want to come and sit and chat and have a meal with friends.
Yeah.
Are you going to be listing this on the survey, the different issues at the center, or are we just discussing this? Or is somebody going to put together a letter to go in the paper or to residents to let them know how small this center is and what is happening? Thank you.
Yeah, I can speak for the report that we're preparing, and it will not necessarily go sort of blow by blow in detail all of the limitations of the Pleasant Street Center. But I think if that's something that Recalc or COA or other folks want to do, I think that's it sounds like a task that people think is really important. So I think that is certainly something that could be done. Nancy, were you going to say something?
Yes, I was. This was a great survey, very interesting results. And Rosemary speaks to a lot of existing issues with the center. But I think one of the things that John Sasso said was we have to look ahead and we have to think about how we're going to reach out to all the people out there that aren't even aware of the Pleasant Street Center, never mind the programs are being offered. So I think that that's a good task to move us forward.
Yep.
That's all.
I would agree. Thank you, Nancy.
Can I just say one quick thing? Sorry. So just to be aware, we did actually, as part of the last presentation we made to the select board, provide some, not in gory detail, some communication about kind of the current status. We continue, I think we've documented quite a bit of it in some of the work that Recalc's done. There's no reason why we can't include that in some of the work that we'll finish this, finish off Recalc's position. But we did present on that previously, and there isn't any reason why we couldn't continue to document issues on that. And that's obviously the reason why these groups have been put together in the first place. So I definitely hear you, and I think we should, if there are other issues, I think I had a list. If you look at the presentation we made to the select board, I think it was last month or the end of October. If there are other things that we missed, by all means, let us know, and we can add that to the list.
Karen?
I don't know if this really is pertinent to your presentation, but one of the things I'm thinking about is recently there were some tours of the Killam building to show the community the need for a new building. And I'm wondering the same thing, if that could happen at the Pleasant Street Center, especially during the working day and not at night, so that all the things that Rosemary is talking about could be seen by younger members of the community.
That's a great idea.
Or do it on a weekend. So people
But
can see
then
it during the day.
but people are not there, the employees, staff aren't there at the time. So I think it's really, to see what I think, the impact is when staff is actually there, and how pitiful the surroundings are and their office spaces are is more dramatic during working hours. Just a thought.
Yeah. Thank you. I just put in the chat to the question earlier about the ARPA funds, the outline that was presented last May to the select board, the detail on how the funds were itemized. And to my knowledge, 300,000 has not been spent on a feasibility study. Some smaller amount has been spent on Walgreens, but the feasibility study was intended for 300,000 of the 900,000, which would leave 600,000 for programming and bus trips and the Wellness Wednesdays and so forth and so on, has been what we've worked on since, I guess, since we finally got the approval from the select board that we have the funding. So I just wanted to clarify that. And also to give a shout out to the existing staff at the Pleasant Street Center who work really hard with the resources that they have. I want to acknowledge that because like everyone's been discussing, the building has limitations, the capacity, the funding, it's all limited, which we're very used to in government in so many ways. The town hall is no exception. We're modest, and that's not to say it's right. And I agree that this is really a communications exercise to make this more broadly known in the community, because I think it's like everyone said, I don't think people realize what's going on. But I do want to also look at the glass as being half full and say thank you and certainly kudos to everyone who pulls great programs together, the Wellness Wednesdays at the library in particular, the bus trips that Jen has been helping to coordinate, just so many things that are positive. So, but yeah, we definitely have a lot of work going forward. So thanks.
I see Rosemary's hand.
I also want to add that the Reading Chronicle, I believe within the last 4 to 6 weeks, there was either an article or a comment by somebody who had surveyed other surrounding towns to see what they spent on elder services. And we spend 1/3 of what they spend. I couldn't put my hands on that article to quote the various towns. Anybody know about that? Did anybody see the article? Does anybody get the newspaper?
Yes. Oh, well, I saw the article, but also I talked about that when I made the presentation before the Finance Committee about these needs for the senior center.
So regarding the Finance Committee and monies for the elderly, I understand we don't have a separate line on the fiscal budget, but the fiscal budget is coming up. Could monies be increased to be spent on the elderly? I don't know anything about the Finance Committee.
No, that's why I made this. I highlighted at the Finance Committee specifically about the budget. That this, whatever was going to happen, the budget needs to start being increased right away. And
what budget? Are you talking about the elder budget?
For senior services?
Senior
services. And I did compare it to probably like 5 or 6 other communities, and we certainly don't come off looking too well compared to other communities. And I told them we won't necessarily expect to get it all in 1 year, but look at it as a 5-year thing, phasing it in, but it needs to happen.
So I think that's something that if we notify the public about the community center, the Pleasant Street Community Center, they need to know how underfunded we are compared with our peers.
Right.
If I could just jump in about the budget. So I will be presenting the public services budget. Matt Cornelis will be the department head in a very short amount of time after I retire, overseeing all of the public services, including elder services. And so he and I have been working on the budget, and we'll be presenting a level 1 budget next Tuesday night. next Wednesday night. And that Elder Human Services budget falls within Public Services. So that's where it is, and we have been looking at ways to increase. So it's really in the very, very early stages. So this is just to present to the select board. The finance committee for sure is where a lot of the decisions get made, and certainly the town manager. It's the town manager's budget. So after the first of the year is when that all starts to come together.
I just don't want us to miss out in the time frame. I want the elder people who are alive today to have everything coming to them, that whatever they can get for trips, for food, for gatherings, I want them paid attention to, and we haven't been paid attention to for years. So I do want that to change.
Well, I know Marilyn had talked about advocacy being a major feature for the Council on Aging, and I think that's what you have to do with the Finance Committee, with the Select Board, with the Town Manager. You really have to repeat the message, and it takes a while. You may not, like I said, hopefully you'll get something the first year, but if you keep at it, you can have an impact. It will make a difference.
Another thing regarding the $600,000 fund that is still left for spending for elder services, is there a breakdown on that? Are you showing 600,000 and deducting? We have had a couple of trips, which the people love. We're going on a trip tomorrow to Danversport, and we'll have a lovely time. But is there a running total, a running budget, so that people can look at that and see what's left to be spent for us?
So that is not something that I have at my fingertips, but the town accountant certainly can, keep track of that and run reports on that. It probably makes sense to come up with a way to provide that feedback, whether it's Council on Aging, once a quarter maybe, so that there is some information going forward and a mechanism going forward for how to report that out. I think we should probably talk about that.
And does that have to be spent in specific areas? Is it set up to be spent just for certain things? And we should know that too.
Yeah,
So
if
we
you look
could
at the link in the chat, that's where the presentation is that outlines how much is going to what kinds of things in that 600,000.
What chat?
I put a link in the chat that takes you to the presentation that we gave to the select board back in May.
Oh.
So if you go onto that, if you click on that link, you can go right to the
I don't
packet.
see it in the chat, Jean.
No?
No. I might have to read.
Oh, I'm sorry. I sent it just to one person. My mistake.
But I
Jenny,
think that's something
you
that should
forward
be
it?
posted. That should be posted every once in a while, and so that people who are fighting for monies for the elderly know what there is to be spent for them. I have no idea. I mean, all I know is $900,000 was awarded to elder services. Where is it? Oh, where is it? Who controls that? Who controls it? Where is it? Is it in the bank somewhere? Is there $900,000 in the bank that somebody has access to? Where is that money?
Yeah.
Can I
Nobody
jump
knows?
can I
Go
jump
ahead,
in?
John.
Yeah, can
Yeah.
I jump in here real quick? Just a couple things. First of all, I think we're getting a little bit off track. So I know we really, the focus of this was to hear the results from UMass, and I'm not sure if we're done with that, but I certainly don't want us to go too far if there are no other questions on that. I will say we did, again, during our presentation to the select board back in October, I know it because I said it. I said, if you're not going to increase the funding of the elder services, don't bother building a new senior center. So I mean, I can tell you chapter and verse, that is in this, that is in the meeting. Because I think the recalc, fully understands that, this is not just about a building. It's about more than that. So, and I think this survey kind of reinforces that. The work that we've done looking at other centers reinforces that. And, our view, our perspective, our charter has been to get needs and put them back in front of the select board and let them make those decisions. I think John O'Neill made the perfect point. There is an important need for continued advocacy. All right, I can't say it. I think you know the word I mean. To advocate for these sorts of activities and funding, and I certainly think that purview really falls to COA. A recalc has certainly picked up that flag as well, and I don't think we're going to stop until. But we're gonna sunset, and once we do, that's going to come back to you guys. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. But I'm sorry, I just want to make sure we don't go too far off the track of this meeting. I'm not sure if there were anything else on the agenda, John, but I just want to make sure we close that out. Thank you.
Marilyn?
No, I just wanted to comment on the advocacy. It's on our agenda for Monday night. So what are the next steps and what can we do and what can we do to do outreach and expand it? It's been a priority for at least the last 2 years, and it's time for a next round of it. And you'll be hearing from us, don't worry. We have a work group that's been working on it, and they're going to be reporting, and it's our mission is advocacy. So I encourage anyone who would like to come to the meeting that's not actually on the board, in addition to those who are actually on the board. It will be a conversation, and your input will be welcome. So,
great.
I think if I don't see any other hands, do you see any other hands, Caitlin? I think.
No, I was just going to say, if you guys have other agenda items, I'm ready to turn it over to you or whatever.
Okay, I just want to, like everybody else has done, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And look forward to seeing the presentation again next week with the select board.
Sounds great. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.